Steve at MAPC, and today I have another tutorial for you guys. Today, it's going to be a little different in that we're going to spend the whole tutorial on the abstract concept section, because the things we're going to talk about today are the types of things that people will say, if you understand this, you have a good understanding of the programming language, and I don't totally agree with that. I don't think it's that complex. We're going to talk about inheritance, interfaces, and polymorphism. Now those things, especially polymorphism, sound scary, because polymorphism is just a big word and it sounds really complex, but like I said, don't get scared, it's not that complex, and we're going to spend the whole tutorial talking about it, so it should go over smoothly. The reason I decided to take away the tutorial part is because there aren't really any practical ways you can use them at this point. You'll be using them all the time, but it'll always be in conjunction with other things that we haven't learned yet. So I'm going to start with inheritance. The way I like to think of inheritance is, let's say you're making a game and you want to have every single animal species in the world and have it made into one class per animal species in the game. So that would take forever, but you'll find that, well, if you're taking basic biology, you'll know that animals are actually classified into groups. The highest up classification are invertebrates and vertebrates, and the vertebrates are split into mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and no, there's one more. Oh well, animals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, one more. So the point of this is that what you can do is you can make a class called vertebrate, and you could give it some methods or variables that hold true for all vertebrates. Like, for instance, you can have a variable called background, say backbone equals true, and that might be all you have for the vertebrate class. But the point is that line of code is one line of code you want to write for all the million classes that would fall under the class vertebrate, because when the other class will extend vertebrate, or they'll be children of it, or they'll inherit the attribute from vertebrates. That's how inheritance works. And especially when you go down the line of you create mammal, bird classes, and they have the attributes of mammals and birds, and then when you go down the line and you get to the species, and the most specific one, they only have like a few, and there you'll only be coding the stuff that's specific to that species, and that saves so much time. So that's how inheritance works, and it's also where the idea of abstract classes comes from. An abstract classes is a class that you don't plan on creating anytime soon. It's only used for storing information. Like if you're in the game and you want to create a vertebrate, or you want to create a vertebrate, that doesn't help your program very much, because that's a very, very general statement. So the thing is, if you don't plan ever creating a vertebrate in the game, which would make sense, then you would make the vertebrate an abstract class, and I think it has something to do with memory storage, but anyway, that's what an abstract class is. Alright? And one of the things that a lot of people think is a weakness of Java is that it does not support multiple inheritance. So for instance, if you have an eagle, you can make it extend or inherit, or however you want to say, extend the bird class, which makes sense as part of the bird kingdom. But let's say you also wanted to extend the two-legged animal class. That you can't do in Java. That would be multiple inheritance, and you can't do multiple inheritance in Java. A lot of people consider this a weakness of Java, but the reason why the designers decided to do this is because they wanted to keep the program simple and flexible. If they had multiple inheritance, it would make incompatible with a lot of different platforms, which they felt like was doing more harm than good. And also, it makes it a whole lot more complicated. Imagine if you had Windows or your directory system, and you could have one file, and you could have it branch out into multiple folders. It'll just make the whole tree of the organization just completely fall apart. So that's why they decided to take it out in Java. But at the same time, they have interfaces, and interfaces sort of solve the problem of multiple inheritance. What interfaces are is similar to parent classes, but they basically have a list of things that things that implement it are required to have in programming speak. If a class inherits something, that's called extending. The class extends to the other class, and if it's taking from an interface, it's implementing the interface. So just know that extending a class, implementing interface. Gotta know that vocab. So in order for a class to implement the interface, it has to meet all the requirements of the interface. So basically what they'll have is, the interface will have a list of methods or variables that they don't really care what they do. They just need to be defined in the class. So even if they do nothing in the class, they need to be defined. And that seems kind of useless because they don't really gain anything from the interface, but this all contributes to the concept of polymorphism. And like I said earlier, polymorphism sounds scary, it's a big word, but it's not that bad. Polymorphism means having multiple forms. So we've already talked about it a little bit with inheritance and interfaces, but the big deal with polymorphism is that if you have a method, let's say you have a method that's called shed skin. You have a method that has one of the parameters, it requires a reptile to be passed as one of the parameters. And the idea of polymorphism is it doesn't have to be the reptile class in per se for it to work. If it extends the reptile class, or if you have a reptile interface and it implements the reptile interface, it'll work as well. So if you have the snake, you can pass the snake in as the reptile in the parameter and it'll work. That's what polymorphism means. It really is pretty straightforward if you think about it. So that's all for today. No challenge today, and I'll see you guys next tutorial.